She marched up our driveway like she owned every inch of it, clipboard clutched in one hand, her voice already echoing to the mountain air before she even reached our porch. "I know you're hiding violations in there," she shouted, stabbing a finger toward the front door of our cabin. "Open it, right now." What my wife pulled out moments later drained every bit of color from the HOA president's face and changed the entire situation. But before we get into that, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing just how far these stories reach. My name is Daniel, and 3 months ago, my wife Maria and I finally bought the mountain cabin we'd always dreamed of owning. It was everything we wanted. Quiet, secluded, peaceful, or at least that's what we thought. The neighborhood happened to have an HOA, and its president, a woman named Karen Whitfield, ran the community like it was her own private empire. She had held that position for nearly 15 years, and nobody seemed willing to stand up to her. We'd heard the stories. People getting fined because of the wrong paint color. People getting fined over mailbox designs. People getting fined because their grass was too green or somehow not green enough. We laughed it off. That turned out to be a mistake. It happened on a Saturday morning. Maria was inside making coffee while I was out front repairing a section of the porch railing when we heard tires screech into our gravel driveway. Karen climbed out of her SUV as if she were charging into battle, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, already recording. "You too," she yelled. "I've received multiple complaints about unauthorized renovations on this property." I stared at her. "Complaints from who?" "That's confidential," she snapped. "But I have every right to inspect the inside of this cabin for HOA compliance violations." Maria stepped outside, coffee mug still in her hand. "Karen, this is private property. You can't just—" "I absolutely can," Karen interrupted, her voice climbing even higher. "Every home in this community falls under HOA jurisdiction. I have the authority to inspect for safety and aesthetic violations." By then, neighbors had started stepping onto their porches. Phones appeared. People watched. The whole thing was turning into a spectacle. "You added an extension to the back of this cabin without board approval," Karen continued, thrusting her clipboard toward our sunroom. "That's a major violation. I could fine you $500 a day until it's removed." $500 a day. My stomach twisted. We had poured our savings into building that sunroom. "Karen," I said, doing my best to stay calm, "we hired a licensed contractor. Everything was properly permitted through the county." "The county doesn't matter here," she barked. "The HOA has the final say." Then she pointed at the front door. "Open it before I call the sheriff and report you for obstruction." The crowd around us kept growing. Someone in the background whispered, "She did this to the Petersons, too." They ended up selling. Maria's hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear causing it. It was something else entirely. She carefully placed her coffee mug down. "Karen," she said slowly, "before you take this any further, there's something you should probably see." Karen scoffed. "Unless it's a permit for that sunroom, I don't care." "It's not a permit," Maria replied. Then she turned and walked back inside. The silence that followed felt heavy. Even Karen suddenly looked uncertain about what was happening. About 30 seconds later, Maria returned carrying a single folded document. The paper looked old, yellowed around the edges, the kind of document that had been sitting untouched in a drawer for decades. She unfolded it with deliberate care. "This," Maria said, "is the original deed restriction filed when this cabin was built back in 1987. Karen rolled her eyes. "And that proves absolutely nothing. The HOA governs every property in this neighborhood." "Actually," Maria said, "it doesn't govern this one." She turned the document around so Karen and every neighbor gathered in our driveway could read it for themselves. "This cabin was built 2 years before the HOA even existed," Maria explained. "And when the association was eventually created, the original owner, the man who built this cabin, refused to sign over jurisdiction." She looked directly at Karen. "He made sure that exemption was permanently recorded with the county as a permanent exclusion." Karen's expression changed, only for a split second. That's impossible," she said. "Every property in this development falls under HOA authority. Every property except this one, Maria replied calmly. Lot 14 was legally carved out. It has never been part of the HOA. Not in 1989. Not now. A ripple of gasps spread to the neighbors gathered in our driveway. Karen snatched the document from Maria's hands and scanned it furiously. Now her hands were trembling, not from embarrassment, from panic. This has to be fake, she stammered. I've been collecting dues from this property for years. The records show... She suddenly stopped speaking. Too late. Maria narrowed her eyes. Wait, she said. You've been collecting dues from this address? Karen's face turned ghostly pale. For how long? I asked. That's not... Karen backed toward her SUV. I need to review the files. I'll have someone from the board verify this immediately. She pulled out her phone, her hand visibly shaking, and placed a call. 20 minutes later, another vehicle pulled into our driveway. An older man stepped out, calm, composed. He carried a folder filled with documents. Karen visibly stiffened. Robert, I didn't expect you'd come yourself. You called me about Lot 14, Robert said slowly. I know this property very well. He turned toward us. My father built this cabin in 1987. Then he lifted the folder. I'm the one who filed the exclusion paperwork in 1989. I also sat on the original board that approved it. The crowd went completely silent. Robert turned back to Karen. So, he said evenly, can you explain why this address has been listed as a paying member in the HOA's financial records for the last 12 years? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Karen, Robert continued, his voice low and controlled. Are you telling me you've been collecting dues from a property that was never under our jurisdiction? There must be some clerical error, Karen stammered. I would never... The signature on these deposit records, Robert interrupted, holding up a printed page, is yours, every single year. The silence hanging over the driveway was suffocating. Then one of the neighbors stepped forward, a woman named Diane. Wait, she said. Our cabin is right next to theirs. She looked directly at Robert. Are you saying ours might also be excluded? Robert nodded slowly. Lots 13 and 14 were both included in the original exclusion. He glanced down at the paperwork. Both properties should have been removed from HOA billing back in 1989. Diane turned toward Karen. You've been charging us for 35 years for something we never owed? Karen tried to answer, but Robert raised a hand. I think it's time the board reviewed all of Karen's records, he said, starting today. Within the hour, 2 more neighbors discovered their properties had also been incorrectly billed for decades. The numbers being whispered throughout the neighborhood were staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars collected under false authority. By that evening, Karen Whitfield, the 15-year HOA president and self-appointed enforcer of every yard, fence, and mailbox in community, had been formally removed from the board pending a full financial audit. As for us, our sunroom stayed exactly where it was. That night, Maria looked over at me while holding that old yellow document as if it were made of pure gold. Sometimes, she said softly, the smallest piece of paper carries the biggest truth. If you had been in our position, would you have kept that document hidden away for years like we almost did? Or would you have used it the moment someone like Karen showed up at your door? Let me know your answer in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Revenge Stories for more unforgettable HOA battles every single week.